When the little boy called my sister Mom, the sound didn't just echo through the garden, it split something open inside me. It was supposed to be a simple anniversary party, full of laughter, music, and the clinking of champagne glasses. My sister Lila and her husband, my best friend since college, Daniel, were celebrating 3 years of marriage. The sun was low, painting everything gold, and the scent of jasmine from the back fence carried through the warm evening. Everything felt soft, perfect until that voice cut through. A boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, tugged at Lila's dress. His little hands were sticky with icing from the cake she'd just cut. His eyes dark and familiar lifted to her face, and he said it. Mom. The air seemed to still. I remember the music fading, the laughter stuttering into silence. Lila froze. She looked down at the boy, then up at me, and for the briefest second, something raw flickered across her face. Fear. Then she smiled too quickly. "Oh, sweetheart, you must be mistaken," she said, trying to laugh it off. But her voice trembled. Daniel, standing beside her, blinked like he didn't understand what he'd just heard. I saw his knuckles whiten around the stem of his glass, and in that moment I knew something wasn't right. I didn't say a word then, but my heart whispered a question that wouldn't leave me for months afterward. Who was that child? And what secret had my sister been carrying all this time? Before everything turned into whispers and broken trust, we were as close as sisters could be. Lila was the dreamer, the one who believed the world would bend if she wished hard enough. I was quieter, more grounded. Our parents used to say I was the roots and she was the wind growing up. She'd sneak into my room after dark to tell me her secrets. First, crushes. Failed exams. Dreams of running away to Paris. I'd listen, half annoyed, half amused. Because no matter what she confessed, I loved her fiercely. She was my only sister. Daniel came into our lives when I was 22. He was my classmate in business school, funny, thoughtful, always the first to notice when I was struggling. We studied late nights in the library, sharing cheap coffee and stale croissants, laughing about how we'd conquer the world someday. I never thought of him as more than a friend. I was dating someone else back then, and Daniel had his own quiet heartbreaks. When he met Lila at one of our graduation dinners, something shifted. She was visiting from out of town, still wild and radiant, and Daniel couldn't take his eyes off her. I teased him about it for weeks. "You're falling for my sister, aren't you?" I'd laugh, and he did it at first. I felt proud, like I'd somehow created this perfect match between two people I loved most. They fit, or so I thought. Lila softened Daniel's seriousness, and Daniel steadied Lila's impulsive heart. When he proposed a year later, he asked for my blessing first. I remember crying as I hugged them both, thinking I'd never seen my sister so happy. The wedding was small, simple, just family and a few friends. I was maid of honor, standing beside her as she vowed forever to the man who had once been my closest friend. And though I felt a strange ache, deep down a quiet loneliness, I couldn't name. I brushed it aside after they married. Life fell into rhythm. I bought a small apartment across town and poured myself into work. Daniel and Lila moved into a modest house with a white porch and a lemon tree in the yard. We'd have Sunday dinners together, rotating between our homes. I'd cook her favorite spaghetti carbonara, and she'd bring her latest Pinterest dessert experiments that never quite looked like the pictures. Those were good years. I remember the soft hum of normalcy, the smell of coffee on their porch, Daniel's laughter echoing from the kitchen, Lila humming as she set the table. Sometimes I'd sit there and feel grateful, like I was surrounded by the kind of love people pray for. But even in peace, small cracks begin quietly. I first noticed it in her eyes. Lila had always been expressive when she laughed. Her whole face joined in, but lately, something muted her. I'd ask how she was, and she'd say, "I'm fine." Too quickly, too lightly. Daniel said she'd been tired, working late shifts, dealing with a difficult client. I didn't question it much. Until that evening, 3 years later, when that boy called her mom. The night unraveled after that. Guests whispered, pretending not to. Lila claimed the boy belonged to a friend from her book club and must have gotten confused. The child's guardiana woman I didn't recognize arrived minutes later, apologizing profusely, her face flushed with embarrassment. Still, I couldn't shake the unease in my chest. Lila avoided my eyes all night, clinging to Daniel's arm as though the ground beneath her might crumble. When I left their house, I walked past the garden light still flickering over the grass. I could hear Lila laughing behind me too loudly, too forced. And I remember thinking, that's not my sister's laugh. A week later, I tried to brush it off. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe the boy truly had mistaken her for someone else. But one night, as I cleaned my apartment, I found an old box of photos, college days, birthdays, the wedding. I smiled at the memories until I saw one picture that made my stomach twist. It was taken 6 years ago. A year before Leela married Daniel. She was sitting at a beach cafe holding a baby Tiny wrapped in a blue blanket. I remembered that day now. She'd told me she was babysitting for a friend. But as I stared at the photo, I saw the same eyes I'd seen at the party. The same shape, the same warmth. The little boy who called her mom. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind played loops of conversations, moments I'd ignored, stories that hadn't quite added up. Where had Leela really been that year? She'd traveled for work. Why did she avoid certain topics whenever children came up? The pieces started to fit slowly, painfully, and in the stillness of my living room. Under the hum of the refrigerator, I whispered to myself, what if that boy really is hers? I wanted to ask her directly, but something stopped Mitha, fear of shattering the fragile piece we'd built. So instead, I waited, watched, listened, because sometimes, before you confront a lie, you have to understand why it was told in the first place. And deep down, I sensed that my sister's secret wasn't just about a child, it was about something much darker. The week after the anniversary party felt like walking on glass. Every call from Lila came with that brightness she used to fake in high school whenever she'd been caught doing something wrong. Too cheerful, too fast. She'd talk about recipes, the weather, a new plant she bought, anything except what mattered. And Daniel. Daniel was quiet. He'd always been the steady Wanda kind of man who filled silence with small kindnesses. But lately, when we met for coffee, his eyes looked distant. He stirred his cup too long, staring into it like he was waiting for something to appear. I told myself to stay out of it. Whatever that moment at the party meant, it wasn't my business. Leela was an adult. Daniel was her husband. Maybe I'd imagined the fear in her eyes. Maybe that child really had been someone else's. But the universe doesn't let lies rest for long. It started with a visit. One quiet afternoon, Lila showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood at the door with her sunglasses still on, holding a grocery bag like she was carrying something fragile. "Hey, you busy?" she asked, smiling too wide. I shook my head, motioning her in. "You look tired," she shrugged. "Long week." We sat at the table while she unpacked what she'd brought, lemon pastries from a new bakery, still warm. The smell of sugar and citrus filled the kitchen. For a while, it almost felt normal again. We talked about nothing, Mom's garden, the new neighbor, her work. But then I noticed something small. She'd placed her phone face down on the table, and every few minutes it buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. Her fingers twitched each time, but she didn't flip it over. "Someone's persistent," I said lightly, trying to smile. Her hand froze midair, knife hovering over the pastry. "It's just work," she said quickly. "A client." I nodded, pretending not to see the small tremor in her wrist. But when she excused herself to the bathroom, I couldn't stop my eyes from flicking toward that phone. I didn't touch it. I wouldn't cross that line. But I noticed the contact name that flashed when it buzzed again. Just one word. M. No last name. No emoji. Just M. When she came back, her face was pale. "I have to go soon," she said. "Daniel's waiting." Ski left in a hurry, leaving the bag of pastries behind. I stood by the window, watching her car disappear down the street. That night I sat alone, a single lemon tart half-eaten in front of me, and that single letter burned in my mind. M. Over the next few weeks. The distance between Lila and me grew into something heavy and visible. I'd text her and she'd take hours to reply. When she did, her messages felt clipped, formal, the kind you send to a stranger. Daniel noticed it too. One evening, he called me, his voice low. "Hey, have you talked to Lila lately?" "A bit," I said carefully. "Why?" He sighed, long and tired. "She's been distracted. Secretive, even. I don't know. I feel like I'm missing something." The vulnerability in his tone cut deep. I wanted to tell him everything: the boy, the photo, the strange messages, but I held back. It wasn't my place. Not yet. Instead, I said, "Maybe she's just stressed, Daniel. Marriage can get complicated after a while." He gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Yeah, maybe." When we hung up, I felt a guilt I couldn't explain. I was lying to protect my sister, but somehow I felt like I was betraying both of them. A few days later, I went to see her. No warning this time. Just showed up at her house in the afternoon, bringing some homemade soup like I used to. The front yard was quiet. The lemon tree had started to drop fruit, bright yellow against the grass. I knocked, but no one answered. The house was silent, blinds half drawn. I was about to leave when I heard a faint sound from the backyard. A child's laughter. My heart skipped. I followed the sound slowly, stepping around the side gate. And there, in the patch of sunlight near the porch, was the same boy from the anniversary party. He was drawing on the concrete with colored chalk, humming softly to himself. When he saw me, he froze, the chalk dropping from his hand. "Hi there," I said gently. "You're visiting again?" He nodded, eyes wide. "Mommy said not to talk to people." Swallowed hard. "Your mommy?" Before he could answer, a voice came from behind me. "What are you doing here?" Lila's voice, sharp, trembling. Turned. She was standing at the doorway, her face pale, hands gripping the frame like she needed it to stand. "I came to drop off soup," I said softly. "I didn't mean to intrude." Her eyes darted toward the boy. "Inside," she said to him. Her tone left no room for questions. The child ran in, glancing back at me once. We stood there in silence, the only sound the soft creak of the porch swing. "Finally," I said, "Lila. Who is that boy?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I saw tears welling in her eyes, and for a moment I thought she might tell me the truth. But instead she looked away. "He's just someone I'm helping," she said. "A friend's kid. They're having a hard time." Her voice cracked on the word friend. I didn't press her then. The truth was there, trembling between us, but I couldn't force it out. I just nodded and whispered, "Okay." As I turned to leave, I heard her whisper behind me, barely audible, "I didn't mean for it to happen this way." Those words stayed with me for nights. Later that week, Daniel stopped by my place again. He was quieter than usual, his shirt slightly wrinkled, the weight of something unsaid in his posture. "I found something strange," he said finally, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "In Lila's car." It was a birth certificate, folded, creased, but still legible. A child's name. No father listed. And the mother, Leila Bennett. My sister. That was the moment the ground began to shift for real. The lies were no longer whispers, they were written in ink. I stared at Daniel, my throat dry. "Does she know you found this?" He shook his head. "Not yet." I don't know how to ask. I wanted to tell him everything. About the photo, the boy, the fear in her eyes. But something in me hesitated. I wasn't ready, not yet. Because a part of me still hoped there was an explanation that would make sense. A reason that wouldn't destroy the two people I loved most. But deep down, I knew. Whatever truth my sister was hiding. It wasn't just about a child. It was about a choice. One that had changed everything before I ever noticed. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boy's face. Same brown eyes I'd known my whole life, staring back at me from another generation. Lila's eyes. The next morning, I drove to her house before I could talk myself out of it. The sky was overcast, heavy with the kind of silence that warns of rain. I parked a little down the street, gripping the steering wheel until my fingers went numb. When she opened the door, she looked startled. Her hair was uncombed, her robe tied loosely around her waist. There was a shadow under her eyes I hadn't noticed before, Amira. She said softly, using the nickname only she ever used. "It's early." "I know," I said. "We need to talk." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Daniel's gone to work." I walked in. The living room smelled faintly of baby lotion. A small blanket was draped over the couch. On the coffee table sat a half-empty cup of milk and a set of toy cars. The sight of them made my chest ache. "Where's the boy?" I asked. Dochi looked toward the hallway. "Sleeping." I took a breath, steadying my voice. "Lila, I know he's yours." She froze. The color drained from her face, and she pressed her hand against her mouth like she could push the truth back in. "I saw the birth certificate." I continued quietly. "Daniel found it. He doesn't know what to do, but I need to hear it from you." She sat down slowly, her hands trembling in her lap. For a long time, she said nothing. Just the ticking of the clock filled the silence between us. Finally, she whispered, "His name is Noah." The words fell like stones. "He's 5, she continued, her voice breaking. "I had him before Daniel and I got married. Before you even knew I was seeing anyone." I sank into the armchair across from her, my throat dry. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell him?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I was scared of what? Of losing everything." She started from the beginning. 6 years ago, before she met Daniel again through me, she'd been in a relationship with a man named Mark. They dated for almost a year. He was charming, successful, a photographer who traveled constantly. She thought he was the one. Then she got pregnant. When I told him, she said, twisting the edge of her sleeve, he said he wasn't ready, that a baby would ruin his career. He offered me money to take care of it. When I refused, he disappeared. She left town for a while, telling everyone she was traveling for work. She moved to a small coastal city, gave birth alone, and stayed there until Noah was almost 1. "I tried to come back," she said, her voice shaking, "but everything had changed. You and Daniel were always together. He was stable, kind, safe. And when he started looking at me the way he used to look at you, I stiffened. The way he used to look at me." Her eyes widened, realizing what she'd said. "I didn't mean, yes, you did." She looked down. "I thought you two had moved on, that you were just friends." I swallowed hard. "We were, but that doesn't make this better, Lila." "I know," she whispered. "But when he proposed, I couldn't bring myself to tell him about Noah. He wanted a family, a clean slate. And I didn't want to ruin that. So you hid your child," I said, my voice low. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought I could make it work. Noah's been living with my friend Mia. She's the one who brought him to the party that day. He wasn't supposed to call me mom. He doesn't understand why he can't." The image of that little boy calling her mom echoed again in my mind. The innocence of it. The confusion. "You lied to Daniel," I said softly. "Every day, for years." Her voice broke. "I know. And every day I hated myself for it." There was a long silence between us. Rain began to fall outside, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the windows. "What are you going to do?" I asked finally. She looked lost. "I don't know. If I tell him, he'll leave me. If I don't, I'll keep living this lie." I stood up, unable to stay still. "You can't build love on secrets, Lila. You of all people should know that." She looked at me with pleading eyes. "Please don't tell him. Not yet. Give me time." I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her she didn't deserve time after what she'd done. But looking at her, my little sister, trembling and broken eye, felt that familiar pull of protection. "I won't say anything," I said quietly. "But you need to tell him yourself soon." She nodded, whispering a shaky thank you. As I left the house, I glanced toward the hallway. A small hand was clutching the edge of the doorframe. Noah peeked out, his dark eyes watching me with the same quiet sadness that had haunted his mother. I smiled softly. forcing my voice to stay calm. "Hey, buddy." He tilted his head. "Are you Mommy's sister?" "Yes," I said. "I'm your aunt," he grinned, the kind of grin that comes from a child who doesn't yet understand the world's mezinzas. "Mommy said you make the best cookies." I laughed through the ache in my throat. She wasn't wrong. A few nights later, Daniel called again. His voice was tight, urgent. "Amira, can we meet?" We met at a quiet diner off the highway, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and rain-soaked asphalt. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I confronted her," he said, as soon as I sat down. "She denied it. Said the certificate was a mistake, that it was someone else's paperwork." I felt my heart sink. "She's scared, Daniel." He leaned forward, his eyes glassy. "Amira, please, tell me the truth. You know her better than anyone. Is there something I should know?" I hesitated. I'd promised her. But looking at him, the man who had stood by me through every heartbreak, who trusted me like family, I couldn't lie anymore. "There is," I whispered. "The child, he's hers." Daniel sat back slowly, his hands trembling. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared out the rain-streaked window, watching cars blur by. Finally, he said, "All these years, she let me believe we'd start our family someday, that she wanted to try. And all along," his voice cracked, "she already had one." I reached across the table, resting my hand on his. "She was scared. That doesn't excuse it, but she thought she was protecting what she had with you." He looked at me then, eyes full of betrayal and disbelief. "Protecting it. She destroyed it." He stood abruptly, tossing a few bills onto the table. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly, "but I need time to decide what to do next." When he left, I sat there for a long while, the hum of the diner fading into a dull buzz. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt soaked in something heavy and irreparable. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from Lila, he knows. No explanation. No plea. Just those two words. I called her immediately, but she didn't answer. The next morning, Daniel's car was gone from their driveway. And when I stepped into her house, I found Lila sitting on the floor beside Noah's toys. Her eyes hollow, the air thick with silence. "He left," she whispered. "He said he needed space. Said he can't trust me anymore." She buried her face in her hands. "I ruined everything, Amira. Everything." I knelt beside her, pulling her into my arms. "Maybe not everything," I murmured. "You still have Noah, and you still have me." She sobbed quietly against my shoulder, her body shaking. And in that moment, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from hate. Sometimes it's born from fear, the fear of losing love before it's even given a chance to survive. But the storm wasn't over. Not yet. Because secrets, once exposed, have a way of spreading beyond the people who kept them. And the world around us was about to learn the truth, too. The morning after Daniel left, the house felt like a ghost of itself. The curtains were drawn, the clock ticked too loudly, and Lila moved through the rooms like someone half awake. Noah sat on the floor, quietly tracing shapes with his crayons. Too young to understand why his mother kept crying into her tea, I made breakfast that no one touched. By mid-afternoon, she finally spoke. "He's not answering my calls," she said, her voice hollow. "Not even texts." I sat across from her, folding my hands. "He needs time, Lila. You lied to him for years. You can't expect him to just process that overnight." Her eyes filled again. "I didn't lie because I didn't love him." "I know," I said gently, "but love doesn't erase the hurt. It never does." We sat in silence after that, both lost in our thoughts. Outside, the sky had gone gray again, and the wind rustled the lemon tree until the branches creaked. That evening, I decided to reach out to Daniel myself. He agreed to meet reluctantly at the same diner as before. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting in the corner booth with a cup of untouched coffee. He looked tired but calmer, worn down by the kind of thinking that comes only after sleepless nights. "I didn't want to see anyone," he said quietly when I sat down. But I couldn't just keep this bottled up anymore. I nodded, waiting. I keep asking myself why she didn't trust me, he continued, staring out the window. I would have loved that boy. I would have raised him as my own. She knows that. I think that's exactly why she was afraid, I said softly. Because she knew how much you loved deeply, completely. She was scared you'd see her as someone who lied her way into your heart. He gave a bitter laugh. She did lie her way in. I didn't argue. Instead, I asked, "What are you going to do?" He hesitated. Part of me wants to walk away. But the other part, he paused, running a hand through his hair. The other part still loves her. Its honesty hit me harder than I expected. For all the pain she'd caused, Daniel wasn't ready to hate her. Maybe that was what made him the kind of man she'd fallen for in the first place. She's not a bad person, I said, just broken in ways she doesn't know how to fix. He sighed. That doesn't make this easier. Cal, I agreed. But maybe it makes forgiveness possible. The next few days blurred together. Lila stayed home, avoiding the neighbors, ignoring calls from friends who'd started to notice Daniel's absence. She deleted her social media, stopped answering the door. But secrets don't stay buried in small neighborhoods. One afternoon, while I was visiting, the doorbell rang. Lila froze. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel's mother standing on the porch, expression tight. "Lila," I said quietly, "you should talk to her." Lila opened the door slowly. Mrs. Grant, Daniel's mother, cut her off. "I just came from seeing my son," she said sharply. "He told me everything." Lila's hand gripped the edge of the door. "I'm so sorry." The older woman snapped. "You've been lying to him since before you married. You made him believe he wasn't enough for you to start a family when you already had one." I stepped forward. "Mrs. Grant, please, no," she said, eyes flashing. "I treated you like a daughter, Lila. I defended you when others said you were too flighty, too secretive. And this is what you do to my son." Lila's shoulders sagged. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness." Mrs. Grant's voice softened just slightly. "No, you don't. But that boy your son, he does. Don't let your shame destroy him, too." Then she turned and walked away, leaving the door open behind her. Lila stood there for a long time, tears streaming silently down her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "Even his mother knows now. It's all going to come out." I didn't know how to comfort her, because she was right. The next evening, Daniel showed up. He looked drained, like a man who'd fought every emotion and lost. Noah was napping in the other room when he came in. Lila stood by the window, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. "Daniel," she whispered. He took a long breath. "I didn't come here to fight." She nodded, barely breathing. "I just need to understand," he said. "How could you marry me while hiding something so big?" Her voice trembled. "Because I thought if I could make it disappear, I could have a new start. I didn't want you to see me as damaged." He shook his head. "You don't get it, Lila. I loved you because you were real, because you were honest. Or at least I thought you were." "I was afraid," she said, her words tumbling out in desperation. "I had nothing left back then. No money, no support. I was drowning. And then you came back into my life, offering something steady. I just wanted to belong somewhere again." Her tears came fast now, but Daniel didn't move. His silence was harder than shouting. "I don't expect forgiveness," she whispered. "But please don't hate me." He looked away, jaw tight. "I don't hate you," he said finally. "I just don't know who you are anymore." When he left that night, Leela collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. I sat beside her, brushing her hair gently, like I used to when we were kids. "You told him the truth," I said. "That's the first step." She shook her head. "No, the truth came too late. It's always too late." I stayed with her until she fell asleep, her face still streaked with tears. Then I walked into the hallway and saw Noah's small drawings taped to the wall, colorful scribbles of stick figures holding hands. Under one, he'd written, "Mommy, Daddy, me." My chest tightened. The world he'd imagined for himself was already breaking apart. 2 weeks passed. Daniel didn't come home, though he sent money for bills and Noah's care. Lila went through her days in quiet guilt, trying to stay strong for her son. I became the bridge between them, checking in on Daniel, comforting her, helping Noah make sense of things. But then something happened that neither of us expected. One morning, a letter arrived in Daniel's handwriting. I found Leela sitting on the porch, holding it like it might disappear if she blinked. "Are you going to open it?" I asked. She nodded slowly and unfolded it. Her hands shook as she read. "Lila, I've spent weeks trying to hate you, but I can't. What you did hurt me more than I can say. But I keep thinking about that boy Nawand, how he called you Mom. I've thought about how he must be confused, how he deserves a father who doesn't walk away because of his mother's mistakes. If you're willing, I'd like to meet him properly. Not as the man you lied to, but as someone who might still care enough to try." Daniel Leela pressed the letter to her chest, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs for the first time in weeks. Her tears weren't just from shame, they were from hope. When Daniel came over the next evening, Noah was waiting in the living room with one of his drawings in hand. He looked shy at first, clutching the paper tightly. "Hi," he said softly. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Daniel knelt down, his voice gentle. "I am. And I'd like to be yours too." Leela stood in the doorway, holding her breath. Noah smiled and held out the drawing. "I made this. It's us." Daniel took it carefully. On the paper were 3 stick figures again, but this time the label underneath read, "Mommy, me, Daniel." Something in Daniel's expression softened. He looked up at Lila, eyes shining. "He's a good kid." She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "He's the best part of me." For a moment, none of them moved. Then Daniel reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Let's take this one step at a time." Leela covered his hand with hers, nodding through her tears. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. Outside, the sun dipped low behind the lemon tree, and for the first time in months, the house felt like it could breathe again. But as I watched them from the doorway, I couldn't help but wonder what happens when love tries to rebuild itself on the ruins of deception. Sometimes the hardest part of truth isn't speaking it. It's living with what it changes forever. I didn't need to tell anyone what had happened. By the time the sun rose the next morning, everyone seemed to already know, families like ours. Secrets don't stay buried. They just wait for the right gossip to dig them up. It started with a single post, the photo someone took at the anniversary dinner. The moment a little boy had called my sister Mom. By noon, that image had made its way through every family group chat, followed by half-baked stories and self-righteous commentary. By evening, it wasn't just a secret anymore, it was a scandal. When I finally went over to their house, I didn't even recognize it. Curtains drawn, silence thick in the air. My brother-in-law, my best friend, once sat on the couch like he'd been carved out of stone. My sister was in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, her face blotchy and pale. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. He spoke first. His voice was calm in that terrifying way, the kind of calm that comes after the storm, when destruction already feels complete. "You knew something," he said quietly. "Didn't you?" I didn't answer right away. I suspected, I finally said, "but I didn't know. Not until last night." He nodded, like that confirmation didn't surprise him, just settled another truth inside him that he didn't want to face. "She told me the truth this morning," he said. "Everything." Kai turned to my sister. She finally raised her head, eyes red, lips trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," she whispered. "He wasn't supposed to find out like that." "Then how was he supposed to find out?" I asked quietly. "At his retirement party? When the boy turned 18? She flinched. I regretted it immediately. But I couldn't take the words back. My friend looked at me with eyes that didn't hold anger anymore, only exhaustion. "She told me she had a child," he said, "years before we met. I thought the child was with relatives abroad. She never mentioned hiding him. Never said she'd lied about being a mother." My sister buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook, but no sound came out. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I asked her why, he said softly. Do you know what she told me? I didn't answer. She said she wanted a clean start, that she was ashamed, that she didn't think anyone could love her if they knew. The air between us felt heavier than words could carry. I'd known my sister all my life, proud, graceful, the one who always needed control. Seeing her reduced to this small, trembling, stripped of her own lies, it hurt more than I expected. He stood up slowly. I'm not sure what to do, he said. I don't hate her. I just can't look at her right now. He walked past me and out the door, leaving behind only the faint smell of his cologne and a silence that pressed down like guilt. When the door closed, she finally looked up at me. He's gone, isn't he? For now, I said. He needs space. He'll never forgive me. Maybe not right away, but he deserves the truth. And so does that child. She let out a shaky breath. His name is Ion, she whispered. He's 7. He lives with my friend Layla. She's raised him like her own all these years. I send money every month, but I've never seen him. And now? Her voice cracked. Now he wants to see me. I sank into the chair across from her. The weight of what she'd done, what she'd hidden, it wasn't just her burden anymore. It had fallen on all of us. In the days that followed, the whispers turned crueler. At my workplace, a colleague mentioned that poor man whose wife had a secret kid. At the grocery store, 2 women stopped talking the moment they saw me. No one said my name. But I could feel it, the quiet judgment that spills over from one family member to another when I visited my sister again a week later. She looked worse. Her phone had been off for days. The house smelled of cold tea and unopened food. He's filed for separation, she said numbly, staring at the floor. His lawyer called. I'm sorry, I whispered. She looked up, eyes glassy but strangely calm. Maybe I deserve this, she said. I thought I was protecting Ion. But all I did was teach him that love is something you hide. Didn't have words for that. There was nothing I could say that would undo the truth. But when she said, almost in a whisper, I want to bring him home, I knew she had reached the breaking point that could become a turning point. That weekend, I drove her to Layla's house, a small apartment 2 towns away. The boy was waiting at the door, small hands clutching a toy car, eyes wide and curious. When my sister knelt down and whispered, It's me, sweetheart. I'm your mom. I saw her body shake as if she'd been holding that breath for 7 years. The boy blinked, confused, then smiled. The kind of innocent smile that forgives before it even understands. And just like that, the first stone in her wall of shame began to crumble. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't a villain either. She was just a woman who had made a terrible mistake and was finally brave enough to face it. As I stood watching them, I realized something I hadn't before. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It burns first. But what's left after that quiet, trembling honesty? That's where healing begins. Time doesn't heal everything. It just teaches you how to live with the ache, how to make room for it without letting it swallow you. Months passed since that day at Layla's apartment. Ion had moved in with my sister. She rented a smaller house somewhere quiet, away from the whispers and the pity. It wasn't much, a tiny 2-bedroom with cracked walls and a lemon tree outside the window, but it was hers. It was theirs. The first time I visited, I found her sitting on the floor with him, building a Lego house. He laughed every few seconds, the sound bubbling through the room like something pure and unspoiled. For a moment, she looked almost happy, but I could see the weight beneath her smile. The exhaustion of rebuilding something from ashes. After he went to bed, we sat by the kitchen window. The air smelled faintly of soap and rain. He doesn't ask about his father, she said quietly. I think Layla told him stories. Good ones, kind ones. I'll keep it that way for now. I nodded. You're doing the right thing. The truth can wait until he's ready. She gave me a small smile, tired but genuine. You know what hurts the most? It's not that people hate me. It's that I made them right too. I reached across the table, took her hand. You're not defined by what you hid, I said. You're defined by what you do now. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't pull away. Later that night, as I drove home, I passed her husband's street, my best friend's house. The lights were still on. I slowed down, tempted to stop, to tell him how she was trying. But I didn't. Some things need silence to breathe before they can be spoken again. 2 weeks later, he called me. His voice was steady but soft. "How is she?" I paused. "Trying," I said simply. "She's different now, quieter, but good with the boy." There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end. "You know," he said finally, "I still can't decide whether to hate her or miss her." "Maybe you don't have to choose," I said. "You can feel both. That's how love really ends. Not with anger, but with confusion that never fully goes away." He gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "You always know what to say." "No," I replied softly. "I just lived through the same storm." He didn't ask to see her. Not then. But a few days later, he sent something, a small parcel left on her doorstep. Inside was a drawing Ion had made. 3 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. Someone had written us in a child's handwriting. Below it, her husband had scribbled one short note. For him, not for us. "But maybe one day we'll find a way to talk." She showed it to me without a word. I saw tears slip down her face. But they were softer now, not sharp like guilt, but tender like memory. Life found its rhythm again, slowly. Ion started school. My sister began working part-time at a local art studio, something she'd always loved but never dared pursue. And me. I learned to forgive in quiet ways, not with grand gestures, but in the small moments where love peeked through the cracks. Sometimes I'd visit on weekends, bringing groceries or helping with homework. Other times we'd sit in silence, sipping tea. Both of us knowing that not everything needed to be said. One evening, as I was leaving, she stopped me at the door. "You saved me," she said softly. "No," I replied. "You saved yourself. I just stopped you from drowning alone." She smiled, that same half smile she used to have when we were kids, and she'd steal the last piece of cake. But this time, there was gratitude behind it. The following spring, she took Ion to meet my mother. It was the first time they'd met. My mother had aged since all this began, her hair fully silver now, her hands slower, but her eyes still full of questions. When the boy ran up to her, shyly handing her a wilted flower. She looked at my sister and something melted. Without a word, she pulled both of them into her arms. No judgment, no lecture. Just that deep, instinctive kind of love that mothers have when they finally understand that loss is punishment enough later. My mother told me there's no shame in mistakes, only in refusing to grow from them. And I realized then that was the true end of it. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but understanding. Months later, my best friend, her ex-husband now, met me for coffee. We talked about work, about life, about everything but her. But as we were leaving, he said something I still remember. "Tell her I'm glad she's okay," he said quietly. "And tell her that boy looks happy. That's all that matters now." I did. She didn't say anything, just nodded, eyes shining, lips pressed tight in that way she always did when words felt too fragile to use. Sometimes I think about that night, the anniversary, the gasp, the word mom echoing through the restaurant. It feels like a lifetime ago now. Back then, I thought truth only destroys. But now I know it also rebuilds. Just slower and never the same. My sister still walks through her days with a mix of pride and regret. Her son still calls her mom, and this time she answers without fear. And me, I've learned that family isn't about keeping secrets safe. It's about standing beside someone when those secrets finally see the light. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It just makes you honest, and honesty, I've learned, has its own kind of prison. When I look back at everything, the lies, the silence, the betrayal, the quiet attempts to make things right, I no longer see villains or victims. Just people. People who loved imperfectly, who were afraid of loss, who thought hiding pain would keep it from spreading. Not realizing that secrets always have a way of bleeding through the cracks, my sister once told me. I lied because I was scared to lose everything. And I remember thinking, but she lost more by lying than she ever would have by telling the truth. Now I understand. Sometimes fear makes fools of us all. There are nights when I still hear her crying in that small kitchen, whispering apologies to a past that no longer listens. And there are mornings when I see her laugh with her son, and I know that healing, though late, still came. Not as redemption, but as survival. We like to believe that forgiveness is a door we open once, and then everything is fine. But forgiveness is more like walking through a burned house, touching the walls, remembering what they were, and choosing to stay anyway. My sister learned that. Her ex-husband learned it too, in his own quiet way. And me, I learned that truth doesn't destroy love. It only tests what's real enough to remain. So now when people ask about my family, I don't tell them the whole story. Not because I'm ashamed, but because some stories don't need to be retold. They need to be understood. If you've ever kept a secret to protect someone you love, ask yourself, was it really protection or was it fear dressed in care? Because sometimes the hardest kind of love is the kind that tells the truth even when it breaks everything you built.